And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Folks, it's time for us to take back control of our government now before this bureaucratic, oversized, and self-serving federal government starves us of our property, our freedom, our rights, and our liberty. But to do this, we must shed conventional thinking regarding our political structure. We need to be revolutionaries in thought, dissidents in action. Only after we recognize what our government is doing to our freedom and our Constitution will we start taking it back. And welcome to the hallowed halls of the University of Logic, better known as Cristiano's Conservatory, correcting convoluted conversation. This is Liberty Talk Radio. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, on 1170 KFAQ, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. You know, folks, there are weeks that go by that I feel as the most unqualified person to be a talk show host. And this is one of them. And I don't know why I get into these funks, but I just get into them. And I think I try to understand, and I think a problem that I have, and probably most talk show hosts have, which, and some would never admit, and some may not want to admit, is that your focus all week is on your program. I have two programs a week, one on the internet and one here at 1170 KFAQ. And your focus is constantly on the program, which means that you're always trying to make sense of what is going on. Now, let me say that again. Trying to make sense of what is going on. What is going on makes absolutely no sense. So when you're living in this world of mine, which is the antithesis of what is actually occurring, it gets to you after a while. Now, this is not radio talk. This is gut honesty. You can imagine if you were walking around and you were the only person, or felt as if you were the only person thinking the way you did. You would, after a while, consider yourself either unqualified or clinically insane. And that's why I say to myself, this week I feel totally unqualified, or possibly insane, totally insane. Who knows? I don't know. My staff tells me that all the time, but that's another thing. What do you expect from a bunch of zombies? But, you know, well, at least they're zombies, you know. I pay them $1 a day. What do you want? Yeah. You know, they're all, I know I overpay them. But you have to understand that most people don't focus on this. And I have been doing this for 10 years. And I am not certain if I am coming to or getting to or arriving at a breaking point. Now, let me, you know, and I had no intention of doing this, but I found this piece of paper here, and just a listing of things that of programs, the war on poverty, right? Public housing, the war on terror, Department of Homeland Security, the NSA, CIA, FBI, FEMA, you know, TSA, Federal Reserve Bank, national debt. I can go on and on and on. And there is not one clean item on this list. It is an entire page of these, and these are just items that came off the top of my head. No research required. Support of foreign dictators, incarceration system, war on drugs, trillion-dollar expenditures on offensive weapons, folks. Foreign aid to dictators and terrorists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not certain whether or not this is good for anyone's psyche. I know it's not good for mine. Possibly, I would think about these items anyway. These subjects would be in my mind, but I wouldn't have a venue from which to vent it, and maybe I would be worse off. Now, this has affected my thinking dramatically, because when I think of any particular issue, and let me take one mundane issue, such as the minimum wage issue, which about drives me nuts, and we've talked about this before, I'm not going to get into it. But the way I think is this way. Let me explain. Whenever you have a minimum in anything, forget about the minimum wage issue. If I say minimum, what word comes to your mind? People here in the studio, I have a bunch of people. If I minimum what? What's the next word?
Wage.
Well, maximum. Anyone think maximum? Right? You have a minimum. If you have a minimum, you must have a maximum. Does anyone disagree with that?
Makes sense.
It makes sense, right? Anytime in anything that you do, whenever there's a minimum of something, there is also a maximum. There's no such thing. Here's a minimum, infinity. Nothing in physics, mathematics, and in government, except in government, by the way. My point being is that if we wanted to be logical about the minimum wage, we should also be discussing the maximum wage. Now, once you come to the point of saying maximum wage, that's not right. There should be no maximum wage, Joe. The minimum is to protect people, blah, blah, blah. But I'm not talking about its efficacy. I am talking about whether or not it is a logical argument. And if there is no maximum, there can be no minimum. Now, I'm not going to go any further than that. I just want for you to understand why I'm losing my mind. I'll give you another one. All right. Let's say. Oh, geez, I totally lost my minimum wage, maximum wage. I have totally lost my train of thought.
Well, now that you've done that, Joe, let me just add to this. Maybe that's the idea. Maybe that's what they want. Is they want to have a maximum.
Oh yeah, no, maybe they
want to have a maximum.
I don't doubt that whatsoever.
Yeah, that's exactly where they're going. And if they put a minimum wage on, then they're going to put a maximum wage on there, and then they're going to just tell you what you can make.
Yeah,
how about that?
That's absolutely. Well,
collectivism.
Well, yeah. my point being is that if in fact you're telling people how much they can make at one level, then you should be able to tell them what to make at all levels. I mean, you cannot indiscriminately pick a level.
It's crazy.
I think it makes it really discouraging, too, because when people hear minimum wage, they hear like some sort of sympathy card, like, oh, the government's out to protect me. They're going to make sure I don't make below $10 an hour or whatever the case may be. And so how do you argue against something that seems to be in favor of the little guy? And that can be very overwhelming.
And the reality is it's not in favor of the little guy. The little guy loses out because he loses his job or he gets less hours. And the boss in a small business is going to have to pick up the slack.
Yeah, but I mean,
because
try telling that to the little guy.
He can't afford it. He's got to either get some automated machine to do the work, or he's got to come up with a better way to get the job done than to pay the minimum wage if he's got a business that's based on, entry-level people, such as, in the burger business and that type of thing. Yeah. So, it's crazy. It's politics, too, because only about 4% of any people in the United States are on minimum wage. People down here slinging burgers are not on minimum wage. I guarantee you. I got a daughter that works in the industry. She doesn't make minimum wage. She didn't start at minimum wage. She started way above it, and we're in Oklahoma. We're in the lowest paid place of the world. It's all politics. They're just doing that to tell somebody who's so removed from that kind of income, some progressive neocon or somebody that's got a lot of money, those people are thinking, oh, those poor people are on minimum wage. No, they're not that stupid. Mm-hmm. They're going to do a better job so they get off of minimum wage. They maybe started at minimum wage. Just because they're working at Walmart don't mean they're stupid.
Right, and we don't even have an effective concept of what poor is in the first place. I mean,
well, especially the people who are in the ivory tower, especially the people who are making a lot of money, are working for the government. They have no idea. It just makes them feel good. Yeah, well, it makes them feel good.
Yeah, even the lowest of the low here has a cell phone and has 3 TVs.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Well, let me throw something else out. If, in fact, I'm an employer, right? Yeah. I'm the employer taking the risk. Why don't I get a minimum wage?
Well, let me go there.
Right. I mean, you understand where I'm coming from.
I got a small business. I got 5 people
None
employed.
of it makes any sense. And
and
this is what we have to live with, and then we have to take sides, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. You take the sides, and then you vote that way, and you just vote yourself straight to hell.
Yeah, well, maybe the Social Security Department ought to have a line for all the owners of small businesses to come every Friday who cut checks for everybody else, but there's not enough money. They didn't get enough money because the economy sucks because of what happened, in 2008 and what's continually happening. They get to go down to Social Security and they say, can you cover this check I wrote for myself for my salary? It's about maybe $200 more than the people I work for, but maybe they put a limit on it and they give me and I can clear the check.
Absolutely.
I got to hold it till Tuesday or Wednesday.
But wait a minute, my brain just kicked in.
Okay, good.
My brain just kicked in.
All right, Joe.
Good. Yeah.
And every time I think of a problem, this is what I don't know why I couldn't. My brain is stuck today. But every time I think of a problem, I think, well, how do we find out if this is a logical premise? Well, let's take welfare. Well, you can have a few people on welfare, but what if everyone in the nation was on welfare? Would you have a country? No. Right, no, the answer is no, right.
Absolutely
now,
not.
what if you had no one on welfare and everyone was productively working? Would you have a country?
Sure.
You would. Yeah. So you see, it's really an all or nothing. Now we say, oh, Joe, you can't be extreme. No, you must be extreme because either the principle is valid or it's not. You don't take a valid principle, bastardize it to suit your political genre, your political means.
And I'm sure.
And then try to justify it. You can't. It's the all or nothing clause. It's either all or nothing.
And Joe, people listening on this and they think, oh, you're so mean. Oh, my gosh, you don't want to help people who are that's not the idea. No one said that we don't want to help people who are destitute or don't have an income or lost their job. The community's supposed to do that.
Yeah.
The community that you live in, when you see somebody out of work, hey, can I help that person get a job? Maybe he can work here part-time and here part-time. We have advocated that kind of sympathy and empathy for our fellow man to the federal government, and they don't do a very good job of it, Joe.
And then when someone gives, like, for example, I give to Doctors Without Borders, have been every year, almost every month I give money to them, and because I researched them, and they have a very low administrative, most of the money goes to the people, help the people and whatever. And guess what the response I get? They go, oh, I know why you're doing that. I said, yeah, because there's people starving and dying all over the world. That's why. No, because you're getting a tax break. Well, you bum, you absolute socialist bum. You can't even give me credit. If I'm helping to save someone's life, I'm criticized for it because I'm getting a tax break.
But I guarantee you, Joe.
Dead.
Joe, I guarantee you would have gave to that organization whether you got a tax break or not, and you know it.
Oh, absolutely. Now, we're going to our break now. We're having our soft break. After our break, we're having Andy Sutton. He is my favorite economist. Awesome. He is unbelievable.
You hate that
Commonwealth
word, but he
of
is
Pennsylvania. Awesome. He can be found on Sutton-associates.net. His newsletters are phenomenal. I mean, and they're comical in a way. I mean, he's cynical in the whole bit, but he's phenomenal. And the guy, I have him on my program from time to time on my internet program.
I love Andy.
He will be here right after our break.
Stay tuned.
Don't go away. We know who you are. We'll find you. Before we get to Andy, I'm sure he's on the phone now. Andy, if you just hold on a second, I just want to be, we get people coming in here and all sorts of people walk into the studio because it's
people off the street.
Well, people off the street, yeah. That's how we make our money. We roll them before they leave. But we do. We're very pleased to have with us this evening Chris Emery. He's a VP of marketing for Free Mind Films. Their latest film that they're producing now, Shadow Ring, New World Architects, and is in the production stage right now. He's in the studio right now. We don't have time, but we're going to have him back, and he's going to be talking about the film.
You might mention some of the other films that he's been involved in.
Yeah,
very successful films.
Very successful, yeah.
And what are the names of the film? Yeah. Remind me.
The first one we had, thank you, Joe, for inviting me in the studio, by the way. It was A Noble Eye, Oklahoma City, 1995, feature-length documentary on what really happened with the Oklahoma City bombing. And then the second one was State of Mind, Psychology of Control.
Right.
So, that sounds like a wonderful title. I didn't see that one. I saw the first one.
Yeah, you
Chris,
watch those films, folks, and you'll start thinking like me. You'll even go totally mad like
I bet Andy's heard of those.
Who knows? Andy Sutton, are you on the line?
Hey guys, how you doing? You
Okay,
guys on a protection racket down there or what?
Well, you should be here. We're having a great time. We have the liquors flowing and all this. The girls are on the table dancing. We're having a great time, Andy.
You guys are bouncing people down there. What kind of show did I walk into tonight?
Thank you so much for being on our program, folks. As I said before, Andy is a economist, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. He's with Sutton and Associates. He does all sorts of things. He's my favorite economist, okay? I'll be honest with you. He's my very famous economist. He has on my show on the internet program from time to time, and we talk about a host of issues. And he wanted to come on the show on the commercial 1170 KFAQ because he wants to talk about something that you will not believe when I tell you, hepatitis C. Am I correct, Andy?
Wait a minute, this is not a medical program.
I know
Andy.
that. This is
What
not
do you
Dr.
know?
Block's program,
Yeah.
is it? No, it's not. And he's going to weave through what I mean by that, and you'll get the point. Andy, why don't you just take over from there and tell me to shut up?
Well, I'm not going to tell you to shut up. This issue that I sent an article out about earlier this week, this hepatitis C. It's actually not about hepatitis C. It's about a drug,
Right.
and it's a new drug, fairly new, and it's a very expensive drug. Normally, people are on a course of the drug that costs around $84,000. It's around $1,000 a day for this drug, and that's what you pay if you live here in America. However, if you live in other places, the company calls it an ability to pay pricing model. What I call it is payback. And when you take a look at who the recipients of this steep discount are, basically we're subsidizing a lot of these people in these countries that have lent our government all this money over the years. And this is a trend that we are seeing, and it's this whole situation down in Nevada with the ranch and the cattle and the 53 farmers that used to be there, and now it's down to one. And the land's been pledged to the Chinese so they can build a solar farm. There's other instances where the Chinese are going to have what are called free economic zones here in the United States, and they're basically going to be cordoned off areas where they can put up their little centers of commerce, whatever you will, and function tax-free, use cheap, emphasis on cheap. You guys were talking about minimum wage. Watch what happens with that. Cheap American labor. Yes, the jobs will come back.
That's
there.
right. Yeah.
We are going to be. We are going to be working for the Chinese. We owe. They're the creditor. We're servants to them.
Right.
And this is a trend. So now we're seeing an American company, an American pharmaceutical drug manufacturer, innovates, spends the money, innovates, and basically is saying to the American consumer, and I think probably the government's behind this. I don't have proof of that, but that's an opinion. We are going to subsidize these cheap. They're selling it for 1% of what our cost is here overseas.
1%. So people
and
overseas are going to pay 1% of what we pay.
Yeah.
Now, Andy, allow me to interrupt just for a second. See if my mind is on straight, because tonight I'm having all sorts of difficulties. What's new? But what's happening is that when we pay $1,000 a day for this drug, typically the patient is not paying that. They are being subsidized through Obamacare or something like that, some program. So the government is, in fact, paying the $1,000 to the drug company, but we are, in fact, being taxed to pay for the Obamacare. So we're indirectly paying we're all indirectly paying for the $1,000 so that this drug can be sold for 1% as a payback to the countries overseas. Now, do I have that right, or where did I go wrong?
You nailed it. That's exactly what is going on here, and it's a sterling example of what we're going to see coming down the road, because these countries, particularly the Chinese, they're not stupid people. They know that there's a number of different ways that we can default on our debt, and we're already doing it by one way, and that's by inflation.
Right.
We'll just make it worth less. So yeah, we'll give you your $1.5 trillion, $2 trillion, whatever it is that they own of bonds. We'll give it to you, but it just won't buy what it normally would have bought.
That's correct.
That's not in the agreement when you buy a bond. The agreement is that you'll be paid back in a certain number of dollars. They never reference what the dollars are going to buy.
That's right.
So everybody thinks the Chinese and all these other countries are stupid, and they're not. They know exactly what's going on, just like the cretins down in D.C. Know what's going on. I mean, yeah, you might have a few dumb politicians that can't put together 3 sentences without sticking their foot in their mouth. I mean, we got plenty of those. But don't forget, every one of them has a staff. They have advisors. They have PhD-level economists.
Right.
Maybe they're not worth that much, their weight in salt, but whatever. They have advisors. These people know exactly what they're doing. So what we're seeing here is a very good example of, again, the taxpayer, like you said, you've got insurance companies and the government are basically being a conduit here to get our money out of our pocket into the hands of these foreigners to pay for debts that we never signed on to.
Well, this is going to amount to hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, for this one drug alone.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's such an astronomical price. If you look in America, Clinical Microbiology, which is a fairly well-respected journal in that particular field, they estimated that, with the help of the CDC, there's around 5.5 million cases of hepatitis C here in the United States alone. So if you start doing some math and figure, well, all right, even if half of those people get treated and somebody pays the full freight for that drug, I mean, that's a huge windfall. And those profits go to the company, and that's basically where all their profits are going to come from. They're going to sell to the foreigners at a loss, and they're going to stick it to the American consumer, taxpayer.
Yeah, the consumer doesn't really see it because no one mails the consumer a bill saying, this month you owe $488.36 for the hepatitis C drug that we've dispensed overseas. Please pay within 10 days. They don't see that.
So it doesn't exist.
Yeah, it doesn't exist, right?
Mindset. Yeah,
right.
And see, this is one of those. You were talking about the documentary films, and I'll throw in and say that I've seen them both, and they're both outstanding pictures.
Great.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. Outstanding job. Particularly not particularly, but the psychology one as it relates to this,
right.
And just how people are kind of pigeonholed into these little cubicles mentally, in terms of how they think about these things, and it's kind of like when you go back to the tax withholding. Well, we know if we send people a bill on April 15th for this huge chunk of money, we're going to have a revolution. People are going to get ticked off,
right?
And they're going to have a Boston Tea Party and burn the place down,
right?
But if we just take it out a little at a time over the whole course of the year, they don't care. It doesn't matter because they never had it to begin with. They don't have to. They don't feel like they have to give it up.
Right.
They don't have to write the check.
Right.
So it's totally different. It's the same result. You're out whatever percent, but it gets people to totally just accede to that and say, "Hey, this is okay. I'm okay with that."
Yeah,
and that's exactly what this is here.
And what the Chinese have on their side is that they not only are intelligent, they're astute, but they're very, very patient, and we are not. And the only thing we do, talk about the only people that are stupid are those people who go vote for the lesser of two evils and think something's going to change.
Well, that's insanity right there.
Right, that's part of the insanity. Exactly. Yeah. In the first part of my program, I should have included that in my insanity thing, because it's not driving me nuts. When is this drug currently being dispensed overseas? Is this already in the works, or is this something that's being proposed?
Yeah, it's actually being, from what I can tell, it's actually being sent out. Now, the way drug approvals work, here in the United States, obviously we have the FDA. They fast-track that drug. They call it potential breakthrough status. I forget the exact terminology. It's changed over the years. But they fast-tracked the approval, and it was like 9 or 10 months to get it approved for use here in the U.S. Now, Europe has a different They have a system that you have to go through over there to get these things approved. But a lot of these places, there's no FDA. You go to China, you want to approve, you get something in there. Well, the government says, okay, you can bring it in. They bring it in.
Yeah.
They have a huge number of cases. Now, obviously, they got a lot of people too. So, when you start talking about per thousand or per million or whatever, there's a comparison can be made. But there's a huge potential for use of this drug overseas, and we're going to pay for it. And the kicker is when you look at and somebody's going to take this the wrong way. You guys won't, but somebody will, and that's too bad, I guess. When you look at hepatitis C, it's a drug of how should I say? It's a drug of bad behavior.
Right. Oh, Andy, I have to cut you off now because our hard break is here and we don't have any choice. We can't move that around, okay? Stay on the line and we'll get right back to you after our hard break. Don't go away.
All right.
Folks, stay with us. Thank you.
70.
Folks, we're back here with our guest, Andy Sutton, economist, my favorite economist, Economist Prima, as I say in Italy, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And he's here talking about, first of all, how we are subsidizing other countries and how it's going to come back to bite us. And we're paying for it in a very, very surreptitious way. Andy, you want to continue with that or you want to change the subject matter?
No, let me just make one more point
Sure.
about that, and then we can talk about something else.
Okay.
You think about hepatitis C. It's one of those diseases that it plagues generally drug users. It's a bad behavior kind of disease, and the thing is, this is what even compounds this. It's not something that you see spread evenly about the strata of society, if you will. The people that get this, and I'm not stereotyping by any stretch, but generally speaking, the people that get this are going to be the ones that are going to be more likely to be on a Medicaid, medical assistance, these types of things. This cost, what I'm getting at here, is this cost of this subsidy is going to be borne almost entirely by the taxpayer through the various conduits, if you will.
Right.
Whether it's direct taxes, whether it be health insurance premiums, whether it be these idiotic, they're penalties. No, they're taxes, but they're really not taxes, but they're penalties. John Roberts, thanks a lot.
Right.
Thanks a lot, pal. Maybe he should. Maybe he should pay his tax penalty. And hey, Slick, let us know how that works out for you. But this is going to be one of those things that's going to be borne almost entirely by the taxpayer, and people aren't even going to realize it. And that was actually a client of mine sent me that article about that, and I've been following the drug, did not realize how we were giving most favored nation status in terms of pricing to some of our biggest creditors, and I might add, some of our biggest national enemies. A lot of these doses are going to be heading to places that, if you get on the news, they're places we don't really like too much. So, you guys were talking earlier about this minimum wage stuff and it being all about politics. It goes right across the spectrum, right into this stuff too.
Right.
There's a lot of lip jabbering and a lot of lip service and rhetoric, and it's just it's a psychological type of an operation to box people in and get them thinking just inside these tiny little boxes.
Right.
And if you step outside that box, you'll see steam come out of people's ears. Because
Right.
They can't. It's like dividing by zero.
Yeah, allow me to make one comment here, and please tell me if you disagree. Is that what who they tell us is our enemy is what they want us to believe, but may not really be our enemy. But it suits a particular purpose at that particular time. Do you agree or disagree with that?
No, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, you look at back in the 1980s. We basically outfitted the Mujahideen,
Right.
Because they were fighting Russia in Afghanistan, and so they were our buddies then. And you go through the 90s, and I'm sure that the filmmaker would have some things to say about this. All of a sudden, they became kind of like the boogeyman.
Right.
And now with the Muslim Brotherhood, and we're funding them again, and now it's like the 1980s all over again. So yeah, they're enemies of convenience. Basically.
That's right. George Orwell, 1984. I mean, it changed, flip-flop constantly.
Have the 2 minutes of hate. You got Eurasia or whatever the countries were in the book, and everybody stands up and screams for 2 minutes and gets it all out of their system. I mean, that guy, he knew exactly what was going to happen. I mean, it's amazing. When you read that book, it's uncanny how he nailed it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and I'm going to get off the subject. You get me back on again. And, oh, by the way, folks, Andy Sutton loves to entertain your questions. Our number is 855-866-1170. Let's hear from you. Don't be afraid that you're not going to break in or interrupt or whatever. But please, 855-866-1170. Andy Sutton would love to answer your questions. A big problem that I have, and I said this so many times, I'm sure people are tired of listening to this, is that our teachers are well-schooled, well-educated, and they're not stupid. They're smart, but they're very ignorant of what is going on. And I think this is what's lending more credence to our young folks as to what is going on. That's not true. And it disturbs me. I cannot speak with a teacher without the teacher having absolutely no idea what I'm talking about or being upset that I'm being critical of a particular program. And it starts at a very, very young age. I don't want to go there because we're going to go off a sidetrack, and I don't want to do that for you. But I always have to throw that in. And if you want to make a comment about that, please feel free to do so.
Well, it's an interesting thing when you talk about education, because you think about your average, let's look at a high school teacher. All right, what happens? They go to high school themselves, they graduate, they go to college, they spend 4 years, and they're taught how to teach, supposedly. They're given some subject matter by people of various persuasions, and they spend a period of time, depending on what state you happen to be in, doing what's called student teaching, and then they go out and tell everybody how the world works without having ever set foot really into the world.
Right.
I mean, maybe a part-time job to get through school. I mean, some people really, do have to bust their tail to get through school, and they work full-time, and you find that they're the ones that actually, they do get it. Because when you've had to earn $1 and put food on the table, and you have responsibilities, you learn quickly how the world works.
Right.
But for the vast majority, and that's why it's so easy, for like the NEA and these various education groups, just absolutely buffalo these people. It's because they have no true north frame of reference. They went from mommy and daddy's womb to the government's womb. Basically.
That's right. That's a good way of looking at it. Right.
So they have no perspective, and they're going to go in to a classroom and they're going to tell 15, 16, 17-year-old kids how the world works. They have no clue.
That's right.
So when you talk to them about real subject material and some of these real issues that we're dealing with in the world today and the complexities of how these things interlock and all that kind of stuff, they have no idea what you're talking about. They look at you like you're from Mars, like you're having a break from sanity.
Yeah.
So, and it's a shame. I really think that what they should do is when these kids graduate from college at 21, 22, whatever, that they would have to work 5 or 10 years in the world. Go get a job, cut your teeth, earn a living. You know what? Then come back and teach.
Right, and not with the government, a real job, not the government job.
Right, then you might actually have something to teach.
Right.
You can actually inject some of your own experience into it instead of saying, well, my professor told me in college that when the economy is bad, the government just borrows money until it gets better.
Right. Yeah.
Never thinking that your college professor that just told you that never had to work a day in his life either.
Yeah,
That's
because
right.
he's tenured.
And the one activity that I really wish they would initiate in all schools is the debating team. There was always about 8 nerds in the school that belonged to the debating team, But I think every student should belong to the debating team.
Yeah, they got to think.
Because they have to think through it. Because you get up there and say, oh, no, man, I think that's cool, And you sound like an idiot. You are an idiot. And you have no idea what you're talking about. And you'll go back and maybe research it and find out what the real problem is. And I've known some friends of mine whose children were in debating teams, and these kids were sharp. I mean, they could talk issues. It was very interesting. And I said, every kid should belong to the debating team. All right. Andy tells us our economy now is perfectly fine, right? No problem.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Good.
Economics, and just to make one point of digression quick here before we get on to the next thing. Economics is 90% psychology.
That's right.
When you really look at it, I mean, yeah, the definition is the allocation of scarce resources.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
How is that done? Through psychology.
Right.
People making conscious decisions.
Right.
Various economic actors, agents, what have you, and they make decisions based on what? Well, everything. Their experience, what they're told, propaganda, good or bad, how they've been taught by their parents, how they've not been taught by their parents. It's all psychology.
Right.
People are under the impression that, this is some black box, really complicated subject material. It really isn't. Use common sense. Well, see, that's the thing, is we've been robbed of that. And we've allowed ourselves to be robbed of it. We can't critically think,
right,
and we don't have common sense.
Right.
And those two kind of go hand in hand. If you want to have common sense, you have to be able to think critically, and vice versa. And we seem to have a shortage of both at this point in the ball.
How do we change that? And from your perspective, Andy, how do we change that? And I want to add that you're right, that economics is 90% psychology, just as radio is 90% visual, and people don't understand that.
Yeah,
really.
exactly.
I mean, but how do we change this? This is where my frustration comes in.
Well, this is exactly how you change it, by doing what we're doing right here. We're in a public forum, we're exchanging ideas, and hopefully provoking people to think. And just getting people to take even a quarter of a step back and look at things around them and say, all right, is this really the way I'm being told it is? All right, it isn't. Okay, why? Now they're asking questions. And once you start getting people to ask questions, now you have a chance. So, and unfortunately, history is not on our side for this whole situation. History dictates that really, really, really bad things have to happen to kind of wake people up, to jar people out of their slumber. And you saw that. You go back to 2008. That was almost 6 years ago already, since Lehman.
That's right.
It doesn't seem like it's possible. It's been 6 years already.
Yeah, it really seems like it's 2 years ago. I'll be honest with you. Every time someone says it was 6 years ago, I have to count, because I don't believe them. And I count. I said, that's right. It's 6 years ago.
Yeah. So, but you look at what happened after that, and I harp on this, but it's a good point, and I think it's very valid. You look at what people did for the first time in noted memory. They actually started to pay off their debts. Not the government, not the states, not the municipalities, but people, individuals.
Right.
You take a look at not so much mortgages, but I'm talking like credit cards, car loans, that kind of stuff. That actually contracted.
Right.
For a period of time. It was about 11 months.
That's right.
People actually started, as a group, as Americans, 300 million of us, said, you know what? This is not a good thing. We need to fix this. But you know what? For whatever reason, we couldn't hold it. We couldn't maintain it.
But the government slapped our hands and said, no, bad people, don't do that.
Well, you know what the government did? They said, if you're not going to borrow, then we'll just do it for you.
Right.
And when we're borrowing too much and we keep bouncing up against the debt ceiling, well, we'll just get rid of that. We won't talk about that anymore.
Andy, one of the things that I think happens is that people look up to the government, whether right or wrong. They look up to them as leaders, and what the government starts doing is they start patterning a borrowing concept. And what happens is people go, well, I guess it's okay. The government's doing it, and then they follow suit and go right back into the borrowing cycle themselves.
Well, there's no shame. There's no shame.
No shame.
When I remember when I was young, my parents and my grandparents, especially my grandparents, used to talk about shame. Like if you did something, that was shameful. You never hear that word anymore. You didn't do certain things because
you spent your entire paycheck That's shameful.
Right.
You should have saved a little. That's what they talked about.
That's right.
But today they don't talk about that.
No, absolutely not.
You know, and I think that's what it perpetrates the cycle of borrowing is when the government does it and they promote it and they live it. Oh, we have a deficit. Well, we have to have a deficit. We'll just extend the deficit, and they keep talking like that. And what the common American sitting there that hasn't had to take personal responsibility, you know, they say, oh, yeah, well, you know, I guess that's okay. I'll do the same thing.
But Andy, in that, in what Gary, that's my agent, by the way, he just spoke.
I'm sorry I interrupted.
I let him speak.
But you got me thinking on that.
I let him speak once in a while. You know, he gives me a discount on my bill. You know, but
personal responsibility, Gary, you're a bad man.
He's a bad dude, right? I forgot what I was going to say. I think my mind is slipping, you know.
You're on that new medicine. That's your problem.
I tell you, Dr. Chain, I can't think at all. It's just destroying me. But
I think personal responsibility is the big issue. You know, the banks, we didn't hold them personally responsible. So we bailed them out.
Oh, yeah.
And then we're all looking for our bailout.
But the point being is that when things get really bad, when Lehman went under and the whole thing, and the financial system crashed, even back in, was it 1998 with long-term capital management? It was in 1998 or 1999?
Yeah,
98, right? When the whole system crashed, and even back in 1998, it crashed. I mean, Greenspan went to J.P. Morgan et al. And said, guys, you don't cough up billions. He says this whole world economy is going down the tube because of one hedge fund.
Wow.
One hedge fund. I never forget that, you know. But because we keep on papering it over, it's okay to be in debt because there's no consequence. You see, you can overextend, you can create derivatives, you can be quadrillion dollars in debt. Doesn't make any difference. Just make sure you buy the latest new pickup truck for $58,000. You know. Okay, Andy, I'm sorry, I'm ranting, but I'll let you go on.
You know what the thing that people have to remember is that when you look at 2008, there were consequences. People lost their houses. There was a huge number of foreclosures that went on, and you can go on the internet and find pictures of tent cities and Florida, California, all these real estate hotspots. There were consequences. Our memory is so short. We are so short term, and this ties back. And I hate to keep going back to the first few minutes of the show, but when you guys were talking about the minimum wage, it's short sightedness that actually allows that kind of a scam. I think that's what it is. It's a scam to be perpetrated because people say, I'm going to go from $8.50 an hour, and I'm going to get kicked up to $10.50 an hour. Gimme, and they don't even think past their nose at what the medium or long-term consequences might be. Everything is short.
Right.
The attention span is short. The memory is short. Everything has been kind of dialed in right to in front of our nose, and that is being, in my opinion, is being done for a reason. It's because everybody and their brother who has two brain cells to rub together knows that this thing's at its terminal end.
Yeah.
And
it's
whether they can push it back a month, a year, 2 years, 5 years, we're stuck in bubbles at the bottom of the ocean floor right now with this economy and this debt bubble and this ridiculous currency paradigm and this stupid geopolitical two-bit cheap show that these guys keep scamming everybody with. So what? They're going to go over and they're going to tell Russia and China how it is? That's a good one.
They're insane, Andy.
Country Joe is going to go over there and he's going to spin his 6-shooter on his index finger and he's going to tell the two world powerhouses how it's going to be. Right. You know what? Those guys go over there and they run their mouths. Or they go on TV and they run their mouths and Putin laughs at them and moves a few more troops.
Yeah.
It's a joke.
I can't tell you how many people, and these are red-blooded American people. I'm not talking about, secret communist people. I'm not talking any of that. Regular people that I've known for years who actually have told me, and they say this with regret and with a lot of trepidation. They say, I don't know what's the matter with me. I actually have more respect for Putin than I do for my own president.
Yeah.
And I've heard that on more than one occasion. And I said, well, I said, I understand that. I can understand that. And that has never happened before. We have someone on the line. Would you like to take a call, Andy?
Sure.
Okay. All right. We have Lloyd from Henrietta. Lloyd, thank you for calling in. Liberty Talk Radio on 1170 KFAQ. What is on your mind this evening?
Well, I'd like to ask Andy a question. If he's noticed that the Shanghai Futures Exchange on silver has dropped quite a bit since February, from about 500 metric tons down to 258 metric tons. Has he kept up with anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, you take a look at all of these warehouses, all these exchange warehouses, London Bullion Market, the COMEX here in the United States. Everybody's cleaning it out. They're taking delivery. Everybody's going, not everybody, but a lot of, what used to be the pattern was that you saw the big players, they would just roll their contracts over. And they would never take delivery. They just keep rolling them over and make money or lose money, depending on how prices move. Now what you're seeing, and you've been seeing this really it's been going on for about a decade now, and it's really starting to hit because what happened was initially when prices spiked, there was a lot of people who were willing to sell. I mean, you have a lot of people, especially in this country, that are in dire economic straits. Joe talks about this frequently. Is that they're lining up at your local coin and metal shop to sell off the family silverware to make the next mortgage payment or whatever you might, however you will. So there was metal coming back into the system, and now you're at the point where you have the big players are taking delivery more and more, and in the case of silver, it's even worse because there's a lot of silver that actually gets consumed in different industrial processes, and even in medicine. We've been talking about medicine a little bit tonight, and there's a lot of medical uses for silver. I have a list somewhere. It's a huge list of things that silver is used for. So a lot of that gets consumed. You don't get it back. You can't recycle it. I think silver is one of those metals where it's kind of got a lot more going for it even than gold. Even saying and understanding that more than likely we're going to see gold becoming underpinning for international trade here within the next few years. Silver, I think, has a huge potential just because, A, it gets used up, B, you look at current mine supply and mining ability in years of silver in the ground, and it's in the single digits. There's plenty of silver around. There's just not plenty of silver available for purchase. The people that own this stuff and are hoarding it, they're not going to sell it. So it exists, it's there, but they're not giving it up.
Right.
And so you've got the mine supplies going to satisfy these industrial processes, medical processes, what have you. But all these countries, China, Russia, India, now they're more noted for gold, but they're buying silver too. They're not giving it up. They're not selling. They're buying. So yeah, all these exchanges are seeing their numbers go down, and it's been a trend. And people will play it off as well. Yeah, that's just a one-off event. There was a piece I read quite a few months ago. It was kind of a contrarian piece about silver, basically saying, move on. There's nothing to see here, that kind of thing. And they were taking some things totally out of context. It showed a total lack of understanding of what is driving things, and total disregard for the fact that the whole world, aside from most people in America, is going tangible.
Yeah. Andy, Andy, I have to interrupt you because we only have about 45 seconds left before they chop us right off the air and we go through the hard break at 8 o'clock. Lloyd, thank you so much for calling in, and we're going to have Andy, would you come back if we invited you? I know we are going to invite you. Would you be so kind as to accept that invitation to return to this program at a later date?
Absolutely. It's
right.
Always a pleasure being on talking with you guys, and I enjoy it.
All right. If you could just take a second to tell people how they can reach you if they want to.
They can either go through you, Joe, or they can reach me directly. My email address is Andy at Sutton, SUTTON, -associates.net. So if anybody has any questions, drop me a line.
Very good, Andy. Thank you so much for being our guest. Very good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night. Okay, I guess this is the end of tonight's program, is it not? Yeah, this is the end of tonight's program. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. Folks, you can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. And also remember, support those who support this program as they are helping preserve your freedom. With that, until next time, I'm Joe Cristiano. This is Liberty Talk Radio on 1170 KFAQ. Stay well, stay tuned.